The rain tapped gently against the windowpane of the small apartment, each droplet echoing the rhythm of Emily's anxious heartbeat. She was alone, heavily pregnant, her due date only days away. The air smelled faintly of chamomile tea and lavender from the candle flickering on the kitchen counter, but even those calming scents couldn't quiet the storm inside her mind. Life had been cruel, unpredictable, and unbearably lonely since she and Daniel divorced 3 years ago. She had sworn she would never see him again. Their marriage had ended not with screaming matches or betrayal, but with silence, an aching silence born from miscommunication, pride, and the wounds of unspoken pain. Daniel, a brilliant surgeon with ambitions that consumed him, had seemed to put his career above their marriage. Emily, who had always dreamed of family, warmth, and time together, felt abandoned. And so, one day, they stopped trying. The papers were signed, their love sealed away in the quiet bitterness of regret. Now, as she held her round belly, Emily's thoughts drifted back to him with a mixture of longing and resentment. This child she carried was not his. After Daniel, she had briefly allowed herself to love again. Michael had been kind, attentive, and ready for fatherhood, or so she thought. But when Emily told him she was pregnant, his affection evaporated. He claimed the timing wasn't right, that he wasn't ready, and within weeks, he was gone. Another man who left her when she needed him most. Still, Emily promised herself she would be strong. She would raise her child alone, no matter how hard it became. That night, the contractions began, sharp, undeniable, and growing closer with each wave. Panic set in as she realized she had no one to call. Her mother lived across the country, her closest friend was away traveling, and Michael had disappeared from her life as if she never existed. Clutching her phone, she dialed for an ambulance, praying she could endure until help arrived. The hospital lights were harsh, fluorescent beams that seemed to magnify every ounce of her fear. Nurses rushed her into the delivery ward, their voices urgent but reassuring. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, mingling with the metallic taste of fear in her mouth. Emily gripped the side of the bed, sweat beading her forehead as another contraction tore through her. "Don't worry, miss," a nurse said softly. "The doctor on call tonight is one of the best. You're in safe hands." Emily barely heard the words, lost in the pain and panic of labor. Her breaths came in short gasps, her body trembling as she tried to focus. Then, the door opened. Footsteps approached, and a voice she hadn't heard in years, deep, calm, and achingly familiar, filled the room. "Emily." Her eyes flew open, and there he was. Daniel. For a moment, the world froze. She thought she was hallucinating from the pain, but no, it was him, standing in the crisp white coat of a surgeon, his stethoscope around his neck, his expression a mix of shock and something deeper. His dark eyes, the same ones that once looked at her with love, now stared with disbelief. "You." Her voice cracked, her throat dry from both fear and the weight of the past. Daniel swallowed hard, his professional composure flickering under the storm of emotions in his gaze. "You're my patient." The silence between them was deafening, even as machines beeped and nurses shuffled around. Memories crashed into Emily like a tidal wave, nights spent curled against his chest, arguments that stretched into tearful mornings, the final day she walked out of their shared home. And now, here he was, the man she thought she'd never face again, about to deliver her baby. Emily's breath hitched, a contraction racking her body, dragging her back into the present. She gritted her teeth, clutching the sheets. Daniel moved quickly to her side, instinct overriding hesitation. His hands, steady, practiced, yet gentle, pressed against her arm as he checked her vitals. "You need to focus on your breathing," he said, his voice firm but soft, the way it used to be when he comforted her. Her eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back, refusing to let him see her weakness. I don't want you here." Daniel flinched, but before he could respond, another contraction surged through her, and she screamed. The nurse shot him a look, silently urging him to set aside whatever history existed between them. He nodded, jaw tight, and turned his attention fully to Emily, not as an ex-husband, but as a doctor. Hours blurred into a haze of pain and exhaustion. Daniel remained by her side, issuing calm instructions, encouraging her through every push. Yet beneath his steady exterior, his mind was a storm. He hadn't seen Emily in years, and now she was here, vulnerable, bringing life into the world. And the baby wasn't his. That truth stabbed him deeper than he expected, though he had no right to feel betrayed. Their lives had diverged long ago. Still, the sight of her in agony, the woman he once loved more than life itself, twisted something inside him he thought had died. Between contractions, Emily caught fleeting glimpses of his face. His hair was shorter now, faint lines etched near his eyes, but he was still Daniel, the man who once promised her forever. And though she hated herself for it, a small part of her felt safer with him there. Finally, after hours of struggle, a cry filled the room. High-pitched, raw, and beautiful. Emily collapsed back against the bed, tears streaming down her cheeks as the nurse placed the tiny, wriggling bundle in her arms. Her baby, her miracle. Daniel stood frozen, his chest tightening as he watched her cradle the child. A girl. He couldn't stop the wave of memories, the countless nights they had whispered about children, the names they had picked out, the way Emily's eyes had sparkled with hope back then. Fate was cruel to give him this moment, but not as the father. She's perfect, Emily whispered, her voice breaking. For the first time that night, Daniel's mask cracked. His lips trembled as he said softly, just like her mother. Their eyes met, hers wet with tears, his heavy with emotions unspoken. And in that fragile silence, the years between them seemed to collapse, leaving only two broken hearts in the same room, bound once again by fate. But this was only the beginning. The night settled heavily over the hospital. The cries of newborns echoed faintly down the hall, punctuated by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the hushed footsteps of nurses changing shifts. Emily sat propped up in her bed, her baby girl nestled against her chest, her tiny breaths warming Emily's skin. Despite the exhaustion that consumed her, she couldn't stop gazing at the infant, overwhelmed by both wonder and fear. She hadn't thought much about what this moment would feel like beyond the pain of labor. She hadn't expected to feel so small, so uncertain, holding something so fragile and new. And she certainly hadn't expected Daniel to be there, standing just a few feet away, lingering by the edge of the room as if tethered by invisible strings. He hadn't left after the delivery, though he had every reason to. Instead, he stayed. His presence unsettled her, and yet, deep down, she couldn't deny that it also soothed her. She had always trusted him in ways she hadn't trusted anyone else. The nurse who had assisted earlier peeked in. "Mother and baby are stable. Doctor, do you need me to stay?" Daniel shook his head, his voice low. "I'll keep an eye on them for now." Emily stiffened. "You don't have to," she muttered, unable to look at him. "I know," Daniel replied simply. The nurse left, and silence stretched between them. Emily's fingers stroked her daughter's soft cheek, her heart clenching at how small those features were, how delicate. She wanted to protect her from everything, pain, heartbreak, abandonment. From men who left. Daniel finally broke the silence. "She's healthy, strong. You did well." Emily swallowed, her throat dry. Compliments from him used to make her feel cherished, but now they scraped against old wounds. She forced herself to respond coolly. "Thank you, doctor." The word hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. Daniel flinched, but he didn't correct her. He couldn't. He was no longer her husband. No longer entitled to intimacy, to familiarity. Yet when the baby stirred, letting out a tiny cry, Daniel instinctively stepped closer. "She's hungry," he said gently. Emily nodded, fumbling with the blanket as she tried to adjust. It had been hours since the delivery, and her body was sore, her hands trembling with inexperience. The frustration bubbled up, and tears stung her eyes. Without asking, Daniel moved closer, his hands careful but sure. "Here, let me help." Emily froze, torn between snapping at him and letting him guide her. Finally, exhaustion won. She let him show her how to position the baby, how to support her tiny head. His touch was steady, confident, the same way it used to be when he reassured her in the darkest nights of their marriage. When the baby finally latched, Emily exhaled in relief. She glanced up, just briefly, and caught Daniel watching, not the baby, but her. His gaze was soft, almost reverent, as though he were seeing her for the first time all over again. "Why are you still here?" she whispered, unable to hold his eyes. Daniel hesitated, then said quietly, "Because I couldn't leave." "Not yet." Emily's heart ached at his words, but she steeled herself. "You shouldn't get involved. This isn't your responsibility." "Maybe not," Daniel admitted. His voice wavered slightly, betraying the emotions he tried to hide. "But that doesn't mean I don't care." Emily shut her eyes, tears threatening again. She hated that part of her wanted to believe him. She hated that her heart still remembered what it was like to love him. Hours turned into dawn. The baby slept soundly in the bassinet, her tiny fists curled near her face. The first rays of sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting the room in a pale golden glow. Emily hadn't slept. Her mind was too full, too restless. She noticed Daniel still sitting in the chair beside her bed, his white coat folded neatly on his lap, his head tilted back in exhaustion. He had stayed the entire night. Something inside her softened at the sight. He looked older, wearier than she remembered, but there was a vulnerability in his sleeping form that tugged at her heart. She remembered the nights she used to find him like this after long shifts, too tired to make it to bed, asleep on the couch with medical journals still in his hands. Back then, she would cover him with a blanket, stroke his hair, whisper that she was proud of him. She quickly shook the memories away. That was another lifetime. The baby stirred, her soft cries filling the room. Daniel woke instantly, his eyes darting to Emily and then the infant. He stood, his movements instinctive. "Do you want me to?" "No," Emily interrupted sharply, though her voice cracked. She scooped up her daughter, holding her close. Daniel paused, then nodded, retreating slightly. But his eyes lingered, filled with a mixture of longing and restraint. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "Why are you here, Daniel?" "Really?" He took a breath, his hands tightening around the folded coat. "Because I saw you, and it shook me. I never expected to see you again, Emily. But when I walked into that room last night and saw you in pain," his voice faltered. "I couldn't just be your doctor. Not with everything we once had." Her throat tightened. "We're not the same people anymore." Daniel nodded slowly. "You're right, we're not, but that doesn't erase what we were. Or what I felt seeing you bring life into this world." His gaze flicked briefly to the baby, then back to her. "I know she's not mine. But for a moment, I wished she was." The confession hit Emily like a blow. Her chest ached, her heart betraying her resolve. She wanted to hate him for saying it, but instead, she found herself trembling under the weight of her own buried feelings. "You don't get to say things like that," she whispered, her eyes burning. "Not after everything." Daniel stepped closer, his voice low. "Then tell me, what really happened between us, Emily? Because I thought I was doing everything for us. For our future. But I lost you anyway." Her breath caught. The anger she had buried for years flared to life. "You lost me because you were never there. You were always at the hospital, always chasing some promotion, some surgery, some recognition. I needed you, Daniel. I needed my husband, not a ghost who came home at midnight and left before dawn." Daniel's face paled, his eyes wide with regret. "I thought I was building a life for us. You were building it for yourself," she shot back, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I didn't care about the money or the prestige. I cared about you, but you couldn't see that." The baby whimpered softly, and Emily held her tighter, her sobs quieting as she rocked her daughter. The room was thick with unspoken words, the raw truth finally laid bare. Daniel's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "I'm sorry." 2 words, simple, but heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. For years, she had imagined hearing them. And now that he had spoken them, they broke something open inside her she had kept locked away. Emily closed her eyes, her tears falling silently. She didn't respond. She couldn't. Later that morning, Daniel prepared to leave, though every part of him screamed to stay. He adjusted his coat, his movements stiff. Emily avoided his eyes, her focus on the baby in her arms. "I'll check on you later," he said, hesitating at the door. "You don't have to," Emily replied softly. "I know," he said again. And then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. The moment he left, Emily's heart felt both lighter and heavier. She told herself she didn't need him. She told herself she could raise this child on her own. But as she looked down at her daughter's innocent face, she couldn't shake the memory of Daniel's trembling voice, his regret, his confession. And for the first time in years, she wondered if the love they had lost was truly gone, or if fate had brought them back together for a reason. The days that followed blurred into a fragile rhythm. Emily was discharged from the hospital with her baby, whom she had decided to name Grace, because despite everything, that was what she felt she had been given. Grace was her second chance at life, her reminder that even in the ruins of heartbreak, beauty could bloom. Yet, even outside the hospital walls, Emily couldn't escape the memory of Daniel's presence. His face haunted her every quiet moment, the way his hands had steadied hers, the softness in his eyes when he looked at Grace, the tremor in his voice when he said he was sorry. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself she was strong enough to move forward without him. But Daniel didn't stay away. 2 days after she came home, there was a knock on her door. Emily, still in her robe with Grace cradled against her chest, hesitated before opening it. And there he was, Daniel, holding a small bag of baby supplies. I didn't know if you had everything you needed, he said awkwardly. Emily stared at him, torn between slamming the door and collapsing into his arms. Instead, she stepped aside silently. He entered, placing the bag gently on the counter. Inside were diapers, formula, and a soft pink blanket. The thoughtfulness of it made her chest ache. You didn't have to, she murmured. I wanted to, he said simply. And so, slowly, he became a presence in her life again. Not as her husband, but as someone who quietly showed up, checking in, bringing groceries, holding Grace so Emily could shower or nap. He never overstepped, never asked for more than she could give, but his constancy unnerved her. One evening, Emily found herself watching him from the kitchen doorway. He sat on the couch, cradling Grace against his chest, humming softly. The sight was almost unbearable. Once upon a time, she had dreamed of this exact picture, Daniel with their child. Except Grace wasn't his, and that reality cut deeper than she wanted to admit. She cleared her throat. You don't have to keep coming, you know. I can manage. Daniel looked up, his expression unreadable. I know you can, but that doesn't mean you should do it alone. Her defenses rose. I am alone. That's the choice I made when I left you. His gaze softened. You left because I failed you. But maybe I can try to make it right now, in whatever way you'll let me. Emily's heart clenched. She wanted to scream at him, to remind him that Grace wasn't his, that the time for making it right had passed years ago. But instead, tears burned her eyes, and she whispered, Why now, Daniel? Why after all this time? He stood slowly, crossing the room to face her. Because seeing you again reminded me of everything I lost. And I don't want to lose the chance to be here for you now. Even if it's not the way I once dreamed. Emily's breath caught, her body trembling with the weight of emotions she had buried. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let him back in. But fear gnawed at her. Fear of being hurt again. Weeks turned into months. Daniel's presence became a quiet certainty. He was there for late-night calls when Grace wouldn't stop crying. He was there for doctor's appointments, for the endless errands that seemed impossible with a newborn. And through it all, he never asked for anything in return. One rainy evening, as Emily rocked Grace to sleep, Daniel lingered by the window, watching the storm. His voice was low when he finally spoke. Do you ever think about us? Emily stiffened, her heart pounding. Daniel, I do, he continued, turning toward her. His eyes were heavy with truth. Every day, I think about what we had, what we lost, and I wonder if it's too late to find our way back. Her throat tightened. She wanted to shut him down, to protect herself. But the truth slipped out before she could stop it. Of course I think about us. You were my first love. My only love. Silence stretched between them, charged and fragile. Then, carefully, Daniel stepped closer, his hand brushing hers as she held Grace. I can't change the past, he whispered. But I can promise you this, I won't make the same mistakes again. Not with you, not with her. His gaze flicked to the baby, then back to Emily. I know she's not mine, but I love her already. Because she's part of you. Emily's tears spilled freely, her heart breaking open under the weight of his words. For years, she had told herself their story was over. But looking into his eyes now, she realized it had never truly ended. She swallowed, hard, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can trust you again. Daniel reached up, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. Then let me earn it. One day at a time. Time passed. Slowly, Emily allowed herself to lean on him. Slowly, she let her walls down. And as Grace grew, so too did the bond between them. Daniel was there for Grace's first laugh, her first rollover, her first steps months later. Each milestone bound them closer, weaving new threads into the tapestry of their fractured past. One night, as Emily tucked Grace into her crib, Daniel lingered in the doorway. When she turned, their eyes met, and the air between them shifted. Without words, he crossed the room, his hand finding hers. For the first time in years, she didn't pull away. And when he kissed her, soft, tentative, trembling, it felt like coming home. Their story wasn't perfect. They still argued, still stumbled over the ghosts of their past. Trust was not rebuilt overnight. But they faced it together, choosing each day to try again. Grace grew up surrounded not by brokenness, but by the quiet strength of two people who had found their way back to each other through pain, forgiveness, and love reborn. And though the road had been long, Emily knew in her heart that fate had given her a gift far greater than she ever expected. Not just her daughter, but a second chance at the love she thought she had lost forever.